through the aid of his old slave Henry, who found them a boat. One of my sergeants, Clarence Kennon, who had not then escaped from slavery, was present when they reached the mainland, and he described them as being tattered and dirty from head to foot, and their efforts to escape their pursuers. When the troops under my command occupied Jacksonville, Florida, in March of the following year, we found at the railroad station, packed for departure, a box of papers, some of them valuable. Among them was a letter from this very Hazard to some friend, describing the perils of that adventure, and saying, "If you wish to know hell before your time, go to St. Simon's, and be hunted 10 days by niggers." I have heard Trowbridge say that not one of his men flinched, and they seemed to take delight in the pursuit, though the weather was very hot, and it was fearfully exhausting. This was early in August, and the company remained 2 months at St. Simon's, doing picket duty within hearing of the rebel drums, though not another scout ever ventured on the island to their knowledge. Every Saturday Trowbridge summoned the island people to drill with his soldiers, and they came in hordes, men, women, and children, in every imaginable garb, to the number of 150 or 200. His own men were poorly clothed, and hardly shod at all, and, as no new supply of uniform was provided, they grew more and more ragged. They got poor rations and no pay, but they kept up their spirits. Every week or so some of them would go on scouting excursions to the mainland. One scout used to go regularly to his old mother's hut, and keep himself hid under her bed, while she collected for him all the latest news of rebel movements. This man never came back without bringing recruits with him. At last the news came that Major General Mitchell had come to relieve General Hunter, and that Brigadier General Saxton had gone north, and Trowbridge went to Hilton Head in some anxiety to see if he and his men were utterly forgotten. He prepared a report, showing the services and claims of his men, and took it with him. This was early in October, 1862. The first person he met was Brigadier General Saxton, who informed him that he had authority to organize 5,000 colored troops, and that he, Trowbridge, should be senior captain of the 1st Regiment. This was accordingly done, and Company A of the 1st South Carolina could honestly claim to date its enlistment back to May, 1862, although they never got pay for that period of their service, and their date of muster is November, 1862. The above facts were written down from the narration of Lieutenant Colonel Trowbridge, who may justly claim to have been the first white officer to recruit and command colored troops in this war. He was constantly in command of them from May 9th, 1862, to February 9th, 1866. Except the Louisiana soldiers mentioned in the introduction, of whom no detailed reports have, I think, been published, my regiment was unquestionably the first mustered into the service of the United States, the first company mustered bearing date November 7th, 1862, and the others following in quick succession. The second regiment in order of muster was the 1st Kansas Colored, dating from January 13th, 1863. The first enlistment in the Kansas regiment goes back to August 6th, 1862, while the earliest technical date of enlistment in my regiment was October 19th, 1862, although, as was stated above, one company really dated its organization back to May, 1862. My muster as colonel dates back to November 10th, 1862, several months earlier than that of any other of which I am aware among colored regiments, except that of Colonel Stafford, 1st Louisiana Native Guards, September 27th, 1862. Colonel Williams, of the 1st Kansas Colored, was mustered as lieutenant colonel on January 13th, 1863. As colonel, March 8th, 1863. These dates I have, with the other facts relating to the regiment, from Colonel R.J. Hinton, the first officer detailed to recruit it. To sum up the above facts, my late regiment had unquestioned priority in the muster over all but the Louisiana regiments. It had priority over those in the actual organization and term of service of one company. On the other hand, the Kansas regiment had the priority in average date of enlistment, according to the muster rolls. The first detachment of the 2nd South Carolina Volunteers, Colonel Montgomery, went into camp at Port Royal Island February 23rd, 1863, numbering 120 men. I do not know the date of this muster. It was somewhat delayed, but was probably dated back to about that time. Recruiting for the 54th Massachusetts Colored began on February 9th, 1863, and the first squad went into Camp Redville, Massachusetts, on February 21st, 1863, numbering 25 men. Colonel Shaw's commission, and probably his muster, was dated April 17th, 1863. Report of the Adjutant General of Massachusetts for 1863, page 896 to 899. These were the earliest colored regiments, so far as I know. Appendix C. General Saxton's Instructions. The following are the instructions under which my regiment was raised. It will be seen how unequivocal were the provisions in respect to pay, upon which so long and weary a contest was waged by our friends in Congress before fulfillment of the contract could be secured. War Department, Washington City, D.C., August 25th, 1862. General, your dispatch of the 16th has this moment been received. It is considered by the Department that the instructions given at the time of your appointment were sufficient to enable you to do what you have now requested authority for doing. But in order to place your authority beyond all doubt, you are hereby authorized and instructed. First, to organize in any convenient organization by squads, companies, battalions, regiments, and brigades, or otherwise, colored persons of African descent for volunteer labors, to a number not exceeding 50,000, and muster them into the service of the United States for the term of the war, at a rate of compensation not exceeding $5 per month for common laborers, and $8 per month for mechanical or skilled laborers, and assign them to the Quartermaster's Department, to do and perform such labor's duty as may be required during the present war, and to be subject to the rules and articles of war. Second, the laboring forces herein authorized shall, under the order of the General-in-Chief, or of this Department, be detailed by the Quartermaster General for laboring service with the armies of the United States, and they shall be clothed and subsisted after enrollment in the same manner as any other person in the Quartermaster's service. Third, in view of the small force under your command, and the inability of the Government at the present time to increase it, in order to guard the plantations and settlements occupied by the United States from invasion, and protect the inhabitants thereof from captivity and murder by the enemy, you are also authorized to arm, uniform, equip, and receive into the service of the United States such number of volunteers of African descent as you may deem expedient, not exceeding 5,000, and may detail officers to instruct them in military drill, discipline, and duty, and to command them. The persons so received into the service, and their officers, to be entitled to and receive the same pay and rations as are allowed by law to volunteers in the service. Fourth, you will occupy, if possible, all the islands and plantations heretofore occupied by the Government, and secure and harvest the crops, and cultivate and improve the plantations. Fifth, the population of African descent that cultivate the lands and perform the labor of the rebels constitute a large share of their military strength, and enable the white masters to fill the rebel armies, and wage a cruel and murderous war against the people of the Northern States. By reducing the laboring strength of the rebels, their military power will be reduced. You are therefore authorized by every means in your power to withdraw from the enemy their laboring force and population, and to spare no effort consistent with civilized warfare to weaken, harass, and annoy them, and to establish the authority of the Government of the United States within your department. Sixth, you may turn over to the Navy any number of colored volunteers that may be required for the naval service. Seventh, by recent act of Congress, all men and boys received into the service of the United States, who may have been the slaves of rebel masters, are, with their wives, mothers, and children, declared to be forever free. You and all in your command will so treat and regard them. Yours truly, Edwin M. Stanton, Secretary of War, Brigadier General Saxton. Appendix D. The Struggle for Pay. The story of the attempt to cut down the pay of the colored troops is too long, too complicated, and too humiliating to be here narrated. In the case of my regiment, there stood on record the direct pledge of the War Department to General Saxton that their pay should be the same as that of the whites. So clear was this, that our kind paymaster, Major W. J. Wood, of the New Jersey, took upon himself the responsibility of paying the price agreed upon for 5 months, till he was compelled by express orders to reduce it from $13 per month to $10, and from that to $7. The pay